Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now let's welcome our main speaker for tonight, Mackie.
Hi, I'm Mackie, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm choking on my candy. I want to thank Kevin for asking me to do this, and I really relate to the first speaker because I've avoided this in sobriety for years because I'm so terrified of standing in front of people. But what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that when people get up here and say it's an honor and a privilege to participate in my recovery, that it's not just words, you know, because the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has not only saved my life, but it's saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of people who've come before me, and I'm so grateful to those people who've come before me, who've stood up here and been scared or not scared. And what I thought when I came, that I was the most frightened person, and you don't understand, and it's worse for me than it is for anyone else. And what I've learned is that there's somebody out there who's more scared than me, and it doesn't matter. It's like, this is what I do. This is what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And for me to think that because I'm so scared that I can sit down there and just come and never speak. The way my sponsor explained it to me one time is that, when the Pilgrims came here, and they had their first Thanksgiving, everyone brought, like somebody who grew corn, they brought corn, and somebody else, they were fishermen, they brought fish, and, then somebody else grew pumpkins, and they, brought the pumpkins, and everyone brought something, and they all shared it. And for me to come and just sit there and not ever get up and not ever raise my hand is like I'm coming to this feast and I'm just taking. And I want to be able to, first of all, like, allow God to work in my life, and also just to, do what we do here. And I want to say happy birthday to the birthday people. I love seeing people take cakes, and I love the tradition of giving chips too. It's just gives me hope, and it's really beautiful to see people, just staying sober week after week. And what else? Let's see. Okay. There's things I always want to know about people when they get up here. So I'll tell you the things I want to know. Like, I am 46 years old. I'll be 47 in a couple weeks. And I can't believe it. I never thought I would get this old, and I never thought I would be this sober. I've been sober for 19 years, 6 months, and a week and a half, and I never thought I would be this sober either. And it just was one day at a time. I just kept coming back. And where I came from, I grew up in Orange County, which is south of here. You may or may not know, it's one of the most conservative places in this really liberal state. And my parents were members of the John Birch Society and the Christian Anti-Communist Crusade, and that's not, that's not an endorsement of those organizations. I don't even know if they exist anymore. But my dad had thousands of rounds of ammo buried in our backyard, and my mom was mad because when my parents got married, my dad promised that he would never drink again. And my dad was an alcoholic, and we all know what happens when an alcoholic promises that they're not going to drink. And I know my dad really tried not to drink. And the disease of alcoholism obviously got the better of him. And today my dad has almost 21 years sober, and my mom's been in Al-Anon for almost 22 years. And the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has healed my family relations and given me a family that I never had growing up. And I know, my part of the reason why I talk about, this radical political and religious leanings is because for me, what that gave me was I grew up in an atmosphere of extreme fear and anger, and that was the gift that my parents gave me. They didn't mean to give it to me. It was purely accidental, but that was my foundation was fear and anger, and I was a fearful, angry kid, and I wasn't afraid of the normal things that people are afraid of. I was not afraid of jumping off of a roof, and I wasn't afraid of falling downstairs, and I wasn't afraid of risking my life in any way, riding a crazy horse or whatever. But I was afraid of you, and I was afraid that you were gonna look at me and you were gonna know what a frightened, what a worthless, what a scared and hopeless kid that I was. And what I did, to deal with that is I constructed this survival system. And what my survival system was in the beginning was I read a lot of books, and I escaped into, my favorite books were about magic and about science fiction, and I created this reality for myself where I was this, from outer space, and that eventually my parents from outer space were going to come and get me. And to me it was real, and it was real for me, and even into sobriety. And there was a really long time when I still hoped that my parents from outer space were finally going to find me and come and save me, because I knew that I was different from you, and I knew that you were going to find out someday, and that you were all going to stand around and point at me and laugh, and I was just going to shrivel up like the witch from the Wizard of Oz. And my first experiences with other kids were really uncomfortable, because I didn't have any idea how to relate with other human beings, and my first experiences in school, and my relations with other people were, my technique was to pretend that I was a horse, and to stomp my feet and hold my hands up and shake my head, and the other kids didn't really understand how to relate to me very well, and didn't work. It didn't work, and it got worse. It just got worse and worse from there. My experiences in school where I literally like the Lord of the Flies book, and I don't know, that's not to endorse that book or anything, but like there, this, horrible environment where I was this, this fat kid piggy with the glasses, and they're going to push me off a cliff, and my head was going to split into, jelly like a watermelon and be shining and sparkling in the sun. I knew what I knew was going to happen to me. And so every day as I was walking to school, it was like I was, going to a concentration camp. And I used my survival skills really well, and they didn't work with, but I stuck to them. I really persevered. And, eventually, I had to start to add, some other, techniques. And after the science fiction and the magic, that really kind of took me out of like the hideous reality that I lived in, and kind of kept, that was like the wall that I started to build between me and you. And after that, I the only thing I ever wanted was to have a horse. And every Christmas, every birthday, I don't want anything except just give me a horse. And I don't want braces, just give me a horse. And so finally, when I was 11 years old, I got a horse, and that saved my life. Because the second that I got out of school, I was at the stables and out of my family's insanity, and being, with the other misfit kids that had horses, and and just, completely in our own world. And that kept me safe for a really long time. I love animals, and they don't ask anything from me, and they don't judge my inability to communicate with other human beings. And so that world was a really, really comfortable, really safe place for me until I got out of high school. And then it was time, then it was like my parents are like, what is she gonna do, what are we gonna do with this kid, and they sent me to a counselor who decided that my special skills were some kind of biomedical thing, and I had my doubts. But I kind of, I didn't really see that I had a choice. So I ended up in Missouri, at the school in Missouri for a year, and I had classes, but basically, what I learned how to do there was drink. And I wanted to talk about my first drink because, not that it's really important, but I remember it. And also, one of the things that, I've heard people talk about here is that invisible line, and I feel like I've never seen that line. I feel like I was born on the other side of it, like way past it. Like I needed a drink way before I finally got my first drink. And when I got my first drink, it was in high school, and me and some of my friends, we got someone to buy us 2 6-packs of Schlitz malt liquor talls, and we went to 3 friends, 2 6-packs, and we went to we said we were going to the football game, which we'd never gone to a football game ever, but we told the parents we're going to a football game, and we went to the parking lot of the game and drank each. So that's 12 divided by 3. We split them, and we drank them in 5 minutes because that's how we thought you were supposed to drink. And we proceeded to have the time of our lives, like just stumbling around, laughing our heads off, and throwing up all over the parking lot. And I don't think I've ever had a better time drinking. But you know, all I remember is I woke up the next day and I couldn't wait to do it again. And I got my opportunity really soon after that. And the thing that happened the second time I took a drink, as much as I could possibly drink, is it was at a party at a friend of mine's house, and she lived on this man-made lake, and we were for some reason decided we were going to walk around this lake, and we walked around the lake, and then we saw these stairs, and we walked up to the top of the stairs, and we were standing at the top of the stairs, just blasted out of our minds, and I remember looking down and seeing this like 2 flights of cement stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs the lake, and then I realized I didn't know where my friends were. And I stood at the top, and I felt like Superman. You know, I just felt like this is how, you know, this is what I've been looking for my whole life, this feeling. And I looked down at the stairs, and I looked down at the lake, and for some reason I thought, if I fall down these stairs, nothing will happen to me. And the next thing I knew, I was in the lake, all wet, and looking for, got up, sprained my ankle, and staggered back to the party, and then threw up red wine all over their white carpeting, and it was I was ecstatic, you know. It was like I knew I was popular. I knew, you know, that you know, I had friends, and I knew that I knew what to do to get rid of the feelings that I had suffered with my whole life. And you know, that you know, was how my drinking went. You know, I kind of learned how to drink without throwing up, but throwing up was a big part of my story, my whole story. And I never had a problem with it. It just, I got used to it. And I made it, you know, I went to college in Missouri and was there for a year. I didn't attend many classes. I turned 21 there, and in Missouri you could drink on the streets, and that was in the 70s, and we were disco dancing and drinking in the streets, and you know, one of my favorite things to do was drink and drive, and we would get this a bottle of this I think it was called Spagnata or something, this red wine, and we would just drive around and listen to David Bowie and drink, and you know, it was the time of my life. And by the end of that year, I decided that I didn't want to be a biomedical engineer. I wanted to I wanted to be something a little more creative. And so I convinced my parents to let me go to a school in San Luis Obispo, and I went there. I went to school in San Luis Obispo, and I graduated. And I have no idea how I graduated. I don't remember much of anything. I know I went to some classes, and I remember I had some teachers, and I still have some of the projects that I made. But I don't, you know, I feel like I didn't learn a thing except for how to drink and use drugs. And when I got out of school with a degree, and I was faced with, okay, now it's time to, you know, get a job. I applied for 10 jobs and didn't get any of them, and I promptly gave up. And then that was in 1980, and from 1980 to 1984, my life was about, you know, getting and finding ways to drink and use drugs until I was obliterated. I mean, I sought oblivion on a daily basis, and by the time when I got out of school, like, you know, I had a little support from my parents. You know, I had a little apartment and a dog, and, you know, everything looked pretty good on the outside. But I tried a few different kinds of things, and, you know, like I did some telemarketing, and I worked at a restaurant, and, you know, this stuff like that. But I could never keep a job, and finally, I think it was about in 1982, like, it just was not worth it anymore. Just, like, trying to work and trying to, pay rent. It just seemed like it was interfering with my life, which was, getting and using alcohol and drugs. And we were having some problems with the landlord, and so I made a decision that, I got this car, which really didn't belong to me either, but, so I moved into the car, and, I did a couch tour, and I did a couch tour for, a while, like a couple years, and finally there was, no one even wanted me to stay on their couch anymore, and I was just, I would occasionally go back to the parents' house with the dog, and somewhere along the line the dog had 9 puppies, and I'd left them at the parents' house too, and they're just, it didn't look good, but it made so much sense to me. I thought I was fine. I was living in my car, like sleeping in my car on the streets of Hollywood. I had a couple bags of clothes, and I had a guitar because I thought I wanted to be a rock star. And I didn't want to practice, but I thought if I did the same drugs as Keith Richards and Patti Smith, that maybe I would become a rock star. But, unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. And, so I just, after one of my many trips back to my parents' house to kind of, like, gather my self together and, kind of, like, get standing up again, I had, somehow, I didn't even know how I did it, but I left a giant box of syringes under the bed in the room that I stayed in, because somebody had given it to me because somewhere along the line I had gotten hepatitis, and they're like, you can't just like sand the ends off of these things and keep using them over and over again here, and so anyway, yeah, the next time I went back they said, we think you have some kind of a problem, we really want you to get help. We found this, and I said, that's not mine. I have no idea where that came from, thinking they would think that it belonged to one of their friends. And I was like in a little bit of delusional thinking. And I left, thinking they had bought my lie, like really believing that they had. And then the next time I went back, they said that it wouldn't help me unless I went into this outpatient program. So, I had no idea at the time. Now I look back on it, and I know that it was the grace of God that spoke through me at that moment. When I actually said, okay, and because I didn't think I needed help. I thought I was fine. I thought that, the alcohol and drugs that I'm doing are the only thing that keep me so that I can exist on this planet. And when I went into meet these people in this outpatient program that my parents wanted me to go to, I have no idea why I sat across from this woman, this totally straight-looking woman, and she talked to me about alcoholism and drug addiction, and in a way that I'd never ever heard anyone talk about it. And there was just like some a little chink in my armor that let that get through, and I could hear her, and there was something about her that that I saw that I wanted, and what it was just, one alcoholic talking to another, and I started my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous through this outpatient program, and what it was, it involved going to therapy 3 times a week for a while, and going to one meeting a week, and going to group therapy and these classes about alcoholism, and for some reason, the obsession to use was lifted at that point in my life, and when when I meet people who still continue to struggle with the obsession to drink and use, I realized that what a miracle and what a gift that was for me, because, I couldn't even imagine being without the thing that had been the love of my life, just like the only thing that I trusted and had faith in, and I've been sober since then, and my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous hasn't been perfect. Sorry. And it's been a really interesting trip though. When I'd been sober for 3 months or so, the dog that I dragged around with me for my whole, like a lot of my using, when I was staying at my parents' at this time, got hit by a car, and I had to go and have it euthanized, and that was like one of the most painful things that has ever happened to me, and I look back and I couldn't understand at the time, like, how could God do this to me? And now, now I understand that, if I could stay sober through that, I know I can stay sober through anything. And that animal was, one of my first experiences with unconditional love, and my second experience with unconditional love is in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I came into the rooms and I sat in the back, and I didn't want anyone to touch me, and I didn't want anyone to hug me, and I didn't want to even say my name, and I didn't want to say I'm an alcoholic, because I wasn't even sure for quite some time that I was an alcoholic. But I sat there, and they, I was going to meetings in Costa Mesa at the Costa Mesa Alano Club, and there was not many people my age. There was like one guy my age, and everyone else was my age now, probably. But they seemed really old, and but they just loved me. They said, keep coming back. Sit down and shut up and get a job, and I kept coming back, and I sat down and I shut up, and I'll never forget when I had 9 months sober, and I finally got the courage to get up and say, Mackie, I'm an alcoholic, and take a tip, and the love in the room was like nothing I had ever experienced before. The smiles on their faces. It was a real turning point in my life. It was like I finally started to see that I could be a human being among human beings. It took me a really long time to get to a point where like I could believe that, but that gave me hope. And I've just, somebody assigned me a sponsor, because no one thought that I had the whatever to even pick out a sponsor, and I started working the steps with her, and I worked through step 4 with her, and she had never done a 4th or a 5th step, but I read her my 4th and 5th step, and then I started over with another sponsor. I picked my own sponsor this time, and I picked this woman in the rooms that she cried every time she shared, and that was the only thing I believed. When people got up here and said, I'm a grateful alcoholic and my life is beautiful, I just was like, lies, like, you're lying. I can't, But this woman got up, and every time she shared, she just would cry, and I knew she was telling the truth. So I asked her to be my sponsor, and we worked through the steps, and eventually she ended up in a mental hospital. Then, but I stayed sober, and and I got another sponsor. I've had a few sponsors in this program, and you know, everyone has been exactly what I needed at the time, and I just you know, what happens next? I don't know. I have grown up in Alcoholics Anonymous. When I had about a year sober, I still hadn't really worked, and my parents were a little sick of supporting me, and they said, you know, it's time to leave and get out on your own, and I just couldn't believe they were making me do that. And with the help of, you know, my sponsor and the therapist and my parents, you know, I started looking for work, doing what I had went to school to do, and they gave me this assignment, which was to just, okay, wake up in the morning, make 10 phone calls, and then you're done, you know, because at the time it was like pretty much all I could do was go to meetings. It, you know, took me a really long time to even figure out how to get dressed and make it to a meeting, and so I would wake up in the morning and I would just cry because I knew that on the other end of the phone was somebody who was just waiting for me to call and waiting that they could humiliate me, and you know, and they knew that their mission in life was to not allow me to speak to the person that I needed to speak to, but eventually, like, I got through to the right person, and you know, just through like a series of coincidences, I ended up getting a job, and like a real job, and I'd never had a real job in my life, like, you know, a 9-to-5, like something that was like a career, and I'd worked at that job for 5 years, and in that, you know, in the process, I learned what it was like, to kind of at least to look like a grown-up, and to show up, and to be self-supporting, and to, you know, pay rent, and pay my phone bill, and pay my gas bill, and, you know, all of that stuff, and I moved to Los Angeles, and left the home group that I had in Costa Mesa, and, you know, started becoming a part of a new home group in Hollywood here, and I just and I had like 5 years sober. I got laid off of that job, and I was at the same time I was dating the biggest sociopath in AA, and I, you know, it just felt like my world was falling apart. You know, just felt like this is the end. You know, what is going on? And now, you know, looking back, I just really see that, you know, that was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. It was like the best thing that could have happened to me, because as a result of that, I started, you know, as a result of losing that job, I started doing the work that I do now, and I love my work, you know, and I'm thrilled to be able to do it, and I never thought that would happen, you know, because I never wanted to work. I wanted somebody to support me, and you know, because I had no idea that there was some like reward from being self-supporting, and you know, now that I've experienced the reward from being self-supporting, I wouldn't give it up for the world, you know. I've turned into a workaholic, and I struggle with that too, you know. But thanks to AA, you know, I have tools to deal with that, and the boyfriend, I tried to run him over. I went to his house. I found there was a newcomer staying in his house. I beat her up. I had to make amends to her immediately. I was not a vision for you. You know, but I kept coming back, you know, and I kept trying, and I've gotten better, you know. I've learned how to, you know, show up and be a responsible, productive member of society, and I've learned how to, you know, act dress like a woman and act like a woman, and kind of be glad that I am, trying to think of, there's been so many incredible experiences, that I've had as a result of being sober, Before I got here, I'd never, I'd never been anywhere except for Missouri and, Orange County and LA. And we went to the river, for vacation. But, since I've been here, I've gotten to go, I've gotten to go all over the world, like, I never thought that I would get to travel, and I just, it's been, it's such an incredible journey, and I'm so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous, because if it wasn't for AA, I never would have been able to show up for this stuff, because, like, I was happy living in my car, with a couple bags of clothes. I thought I was doing good, and what I've learned here is that, my higher power has way bigger plans and dreams for me than I do, and that's another thing that I've really struggled with, the whole higher power things. I came from hellfire and brimstone, and when I got here, I was convinced that I'd already committed the unforgivable sin, and that it was too late. I was, bound for hell, and why bother? And I've gotten a new God in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have had to struggle over and over again to maintain my relationship with that God, because they say that, like, give me a child until the time they're 12, and they'll have them forever. And that, the God of my understanding as a child has, haunted me. And I've worked really hard to develop a relationship with the new God. And, the harder I work on it, the better it gets. It's funny that way. I guess I just wanted to tell, when am I supposed to stop? 8. Oh, 8? Okay, so one more thing. This is, one of my, 8 was like an hour ago. One of the gifts that I've gotten in this program has been, I was talking about how I always felt like an alien, and even in sobriety, I've been convinced that I would come here and I would do everything that you guys did, but I would never get what you guys have, and but I came and I did it anyway. I didn't believe it would work, but I did it anyway. And the amazing thing is that it has worked in my life. And I've got a sponsor in Bill's program and in Lois's program, and I was on a retreat with a bunch of women, and with my sponsor, and we were at the beach, and going through the 12 and 12, and we at one point took a break, and everyone went walking out on the beach, and the beach for me has always been a place where I really can experience, my relationship with God. So I feel like I grew up by the beach. It was one of the, it was one of the places where I had happy memories, and there weren't very many places where I had happy memories. And I, I was standing out on the beach and watching my sponsor and, some of the other women walk down the beach, and I just was overwhelmed with this feeling of, like, the presence of my God. And I looked at, I was looking out at the ocean, and I just felt like that, what do I do? And I just kind of, like, stood there and asked, like, to whatever is out there, like, what do I do? And this voice, like, as clear as day, just said, go with the other human beings. And it's like in that moment, like it became okay for me to be a human being, and I've done a lot of work, to, learn how to show up and be, look like you and act like you. But, there was still this little part of me that never believed that I could really be like you. And in that moment, that was relieved for me. And, I'm not, I still feel like I'm awkward and, don't really know how to, communicate that well with other human beings. But, like, I've gotten so much better, and I'm so grateful just because the people in Alcoholics Anonymous have, carried me when I couldn't walk and listened to me when I couldn't talk, and just shown me unconditional love and taught me how to love myself and taught me how to love my fellows. And I don't know if there's anything I didn't talk about. Come back next week. I'm sure there'll be a great speaker. And this nice man has lots of tapes of great speakers. So for the newcomer, like if you didn't hear your story, please keep coming back. The magic of Alcoholics Anonymous, has worked in my life as I've continued to trudge this road, and I am so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. I love AA, I loved alcohol and I loved drugs and I love AA because it's given me a way to be here. And I want to thank Kevin again, and thank you for having me.
Are there any secretary announcements?
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.